Welcome to Healthcare Forward, where industry leaders, benefit advisors, and healthcare professionals come together and discuss the changing landscape of commercial health plans. Brought to you by Roundstone Insurance, the first group captive for health insurance, where smarter self-funding meets long-term savings. I'm Mike Schroeder, founder and president of Roundstone Insurance. Well, welcome today to Healthcare Forward, Roundstone's podcast. And today we have with us Frank Miotke with Vantage Financial. And Frank is an advisor, and he's been an advisor for a while. He's been down in the trenches working with employers and their employees and their family members for a long time. So welcome, Frank.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mike. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Over all these years, Frank bumped into a lot of different employers, I got to believe, small, medium, and large.
Yeah.
Is there a common mistake or mistakes that these employers make when they go about buying health benefits for their company?
Yeah, great question. So I would say one of the biggest things they tend to do is they really don't focus on it as a strategy. And the resources they put into it are sometimes a little lean. And that can be a mistake because as you go forward, you're going to get into a situation where that growth in cost is going to continue. So I think if they would look at this as one of their top line costs, which is now is becoming, and look at it more as a business strategy versus a transactional strategy, I think that would be better for them to focus on. So that's one of the biggest misses I see when I sit down and I first start asking them what's their strategy, and they just don't have one.
Right. What about when you talk strategy, long-term versus short-term? Is that part of your conversation you have with them?
Absolutely. One of the opening questions is, what is your 3-year, 5-year strategy? And in healthcare, the response is, well, we just wait until we get our renewal and then we react to it. So that's the first introduction to what I'd like to lead them to start talking about and getting into the captive world and conversations if, they're a type of client that would fit that model. And when you ask kind of the C-suite individuals, they look at you a little different because they're not accustomed to being asked that in the healthcare market.
Right.
They run their businesses that way, but they don't run their healthcare that way.
Who's making the decision today? Is it still predominantly HR, or is it the CFO, CEO, and how do you go about, figuring that out?
Yeah, no, that's another really good point. I would say it varies, Mike. And the progressive type companies are getting more and more involved at the executive level, and they're including everybody. So at the table, you're going to have the ownership, the CFOs, and the HR. Because HR is inundated nowadays. They're wearing so many hats, being asked to do so many things. And then you put healthcare on their lap, not only from building a plan, but also the financial side of it. It becomes a little overwhelming. And that's where I think the strategy can be a little bit better. So I've run into all makes and models, and the ones that tend to be more attuned to the cost and what's going on financially, they're the ones that we tend to move towards something like a captive strategy.
It's interesting to me because I think it's pretty unanimous that benefits are like the number 2 expense on a company's P&L. And so you would think, I would know as a CEO, I'd want to be involved.
Yeah.
I'd want to know about it. And certainly the CFO. I think all 3 of them, the HR too, you want to get their perspective, their impression. You mentioned captives, you mentioned self-funding. How do you introduce that into the conversation? And when the reaction is negative, how do you deal with that?
The way I go about it, Mike, is I ask them, do you think you're paying a fair cost? And again, it's another question where they're like, well, I don't know, I guess so. And you're like, well, is that a strategy you have across your company, your enterprise? And I guess so strategy. And they're like, no, that's not how we go about our business. I said, well, why do most people do that in the healthcare side? Because they really don't know if their price is fair. So would you be interested in looking at a different alternative that would kind of peel that onion and open up the true expense and cost of a healthcare plan and learn more about it? And then they tend to agree, say, yeah, we'd love to do that, but is that available for a company my size?
Right.
Which is another misnomer in the industry. Like, we're too small to look at something like that.
Right. You talk about price and what's a fair cost. Yeah. That's something, Roundstone is really promoting, and we really believe it's a good metric for everybody to look at, what we call the
the PEPY, or the per employee per year costs. And I know you're familiar with it, and the national average is knocking on the door of $17,000, and so do you introduce that into the conversation at all?
Eventually, when we start talking, because if you're dealing with the financial side of the company, they want to know, can they track an ROI?
Right.
And I have come to then really start talking about that PEPY and say, do you have any idea how much you're spending on healthcare for every enrolled employee? And they don't. They just, I said, well, if you take your fully insured premium today and divide it by your enrolled, there's your number.
Right.
And do you know what the national average is? And they usually don't, because they're so busy running their companies, right? But this is becoming unsustainable for many, if not most companies. So now it's really starting to bubble up.
Yeah. I just like it because it's a very objective number, and it's also a good measure of how you're doing. So if you are at that national average, and then you take some actions, did it have an impact? And I was really happy. We just finished up our analysis for 25, and across our business, the number is down. It actually dropped $100, which shocked in today's market, and so it's down at $12,100. But I just like it because it's so objective, and folks walk in, and I don't know how you respond when someone, I don't need to talk to you, Frank, because my other advisor got me a 7% increase. I mean, how do you respond when you hear that kind of objection?
I enjoy when I get that objection, because then I ask them again, understanding who's sitting in the room.
Right.
So if you get a 7% in a market that's telling you the average is 10 to 12, that means you ran pretty well. Do you know that at that point, if you're getting a 7%, there's another 15 to 20% you've left on the table that the insurance company's happy to take?
Right.
So that will lead itself to the conversation of, well, 7% below the industry average, shouldn't we be happy? And I'm like, sure, this year you are, but next year your new floor is that 7%,
right,
which you forget about. So next year you get a 12. It's not a 12, it's a 19. So I love it when that is thrown up, and that's when I kind of start education.
Right. And that's where kind of the long-term approach really runs into, headwinds with, if someone's just looking at it transactionally every year, hey, what percentage of them I'm getting? That's what you really need to change their mindset on.
For sure. Yeah. And one of my first successes in the captive world came from a healthcare company, and they asked if there was a different route, and I got introduced to them. And when I asked them how their renewals looked, they said, oh, our renewals are great. And I said, okay, well, give me your last 5 years. And they said, on average, it was 5%. I was like, all right, so their spend was about $1.2 million. So I said, 5%, 5 years, that's 25%, probably compounded to 30. So you're now 30% higher. I said, what if I told you on that $1.2 million spend, you left $100,000 to $200,000 on the table each and every year?
Wow.
Over 5 years, you're looking at potentially $1 million. Would you be interested in having that conversation? Because the mindset today is, let's push the easy button.
Right.
5% is great. Well, it's great for the insurance company.
So with these kind of numbers, and it sounds incredibly compelling. Let's talk a little bit about what is causing or encouraging these employers to go about this in this short-term kind of transactional way. And I believe in, let's talk the elephant in the room here, advisor and broker compensation, and how they're paid has an influence over whether that employer looks short-term or long-term. Would you agree with that? Or, what are your thoughts on advisor compensation?
Yeah, that's near and dear to my heart. So when I came into this industry, I did everything I could to write business, and I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. But as you dig into it, I started asking myself a question. If my groups were getting 15, 20, 25% increases in cost, should I get a 20% increase in compensation? And deep in, I said, no, that I'm not doing my job as an advisor, right? I didn't think that was fair. What I thought was fair was, should I get paid according to their enrollment? And that strategy really is all over the board in the market. So compensation is catch-22. You build a nice book of business, you're getting paid very well, and in bad years, your comp's going up.
Right.
So it's hard to kind of turn around and say, well, I want to wean myself off that, because what does that mean?
Right.
It means a 10, 15, 20% reduction in your compensation, which doesn't bode well for a lot of companies and, looking down on sales folks. but it's the right thing to do because at the end of the day, I get paid very well by the companies and I'm going to do fine. And I've never chosen to focus on that outside of not believing that I should get paid when my customers are having a bad year. I shouldn't get paid more.
So the outcome, what we like to talk about is alignment.
Yeah.
And so if that employer, they're trying to manage that cost as efficiently as they can, doesn't make sense to have their partner advisor really being encouraged to do the opposite. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. Yeah. Roundstone is a big fan of aligning everybody. It's a tough nut to crack. I mean, this marketplace, the cost of healthcare is going up if you don't have everybody rowing together. So that's, I think, one reason why we like to work with you, Frank, is you subscribe to that idea, and hopefully, your customers benefit from that.
Yeah, I'm big on transparency. Mm-hmm. So I was just with a prospective customer the other day, and the last question was, "How do you get paid?"
Right.
And I said, "I'm glad you asked the question." And again, they raised eyebrows, like, "You are?" Mm-hmm. I said, "Yeah, here's how I get paid, and we do a really good job." And sometimes if the customer says, "Well, would you take this?" We evaluate, but I do. And I then ask the question and say, "Tell you what, well, I'll take that. But as I build you into this strategy, if we have the successes, which I think we're going to have in the next 3 to 5 years, would you be okay if I came to you and asked for a raise?" Mm-hmm. And they said, "Absolutely." And to me, that's a partnership.
Right.
If I can show the means to why I would ask for a part of that savings, and 9 times out of 10, they've all been very accommodating to that when that time has come.
Let's chat a little bit about transparency. When you self-fund, you get a lot more information as opposed to when you're fully insured. What are the benefits of that transparency, and where are the mistakes folks make with that information?
So let's start with the mistakes. Okay. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. Right. And that sometimes can be a barrier to entry, is what they don't know can't hurt them. So if you flood them with information without having some regiment to what you're doing and how you're doing it and how you're rolling it out, they really don't know what to do with it, and they don't know how to read it. So we're very cautious when we get into that. We talk about the fact that as we get into this, you're going to be exposed to more information than you ever thought possible. We're very big on de-identifying, because a lot of people don't want to know who the employee is.
Right.
They want to know what is the condition. So that can be the downside. Now, converse to that, the upside is you can start seeing emerging costs and expenses so far in advance. You can determine, are there tools we can apply and resources to apply to that to mitigate that as much as possible. Mm-hmm. I share with my customers as well, you have to pay your way through claims or through premiums. The good part about paying your way through premiums is it's easy. Mm-hmm. However, the good part about paying your way through claims is there's some ways to mitigate it and reduce it.
Right.
And that in a fully insured world, you can't do that. So that's where I get back to that zero. What does that mean?
Right.
Your zero could be a minus 20. So the good part about data is if you use it in the right way, you can absolutely get the best cost possible and make the customer feel like that's the case.
How often do you look at your customers' data? Is it just at renewal time, or are you looking at it during the course of the year to see what you could help them with?
I'm a data junkie, so I look at every check that comes out. So the weekly checks, I open it, I glance at it, I look for outliers, and I've seen a couple, and if I see one, I'll send a quick note over to my team, the prospect or client, and say, "Hey, I know you're going to see this, but I've already looked at this and I'm making some calls on it." Mm-hmm. So I like to see it right away. Some of my customers rely on me to do that, where others, they follow along and track with me. So I review the data personally as quickly as possible, and then we try to meet at least quarterly to talk about what's the expectation for the upcoming quarter.
So you mentioned before, you're talking to a prospect, you talk about, "Hey, would you be interested in saving a couple $100,000? Has that actually happened for you with some of your customers? And if so, was cost containment and data part of the outcome that made it work?
Yeah, I would say it's happened more times than I would have thought, Mike. And that's what's so refreshing about having this strategy, is it's truly something you can implement with a company. I had a company that I was introduced by one of my other clients. Said, "Hey, you've got to talk to Frank. He's got some different ideas." And we sat down and started talking, and they were getting 30, 35, 40% increases. Well, we come to find out that they had really high prescription drug utilization. and they had an individual on a drug called Stelara, which was running $250,000 a year. Well, we implemented some cost containment strategies and were able to advocate for that employee. And for the first year, got the drug off the plan. And then they had multiple diabetics. So we were able to get into a program to buy diabetes-related medications, at a third of the cost. So at the end of that first year, just through prescription drug utilization, we saved that client over $300,000.
Wow.
And when we came in and they're like, what do we do? I'm like, you get a zero this year.
Yeah.
And they're like, that can't be possible. I said, it's possible.
Yeah.
So absolutely. And I've had that happen half a dozen times.
So let me ask you, why don't all advisors do this? I mean, it's just that kind of outcome. You're probably a popular guy at that company, I'd imagine.
Yeah. And that company has referred me into 3 other clients.
Yeah.
And just introduced me. And that's all I
Right.
want is an introduction. Why don't more do it? Combination of things. One, we touched on it. It's easy to live the world you live in and get paid well to do it, and tell a customer, sorry, this is all that's out there.
Right.
Because it's the strategy of being a captive self-funding. You need to become a student of the game. You need to be a pro at it, and it takes time. So depending on where you're at in your career, I learned it probably 6 years in, and I said, this is a solution. This is a real solution. And it took me a couple of years to figure out just the beginnings. And I learn every day. So I think a lot don't do it simply because it takes a long time. They're comfortable with how they are. They're making a great living. Maybe they don't want to work harder because you have to work harder. You're going to meet a customer more often, and you're going to have to learn all these different aspects that navigate through a self-funded world.
There's something I hear a lot from both advisors and employers is, it's just too complex, and I really can't win. It's the marketplace is what the marketplace is, and I just can't do anything different. What are your thoughts on that kind of mindset?
I get that probably one of the top 2 or 3, kind of like, I don't know, I don't have time to do more. And this sounds like I'm going to have to take everything over. They think they're going to be the claims administrator. They're going to have all this work to go through. But I now have customers that have come out the other end of it, and they'll tell me, Frank, this is easier. Okay. It's like the Rosetta Stone. Once you learn the language,
right,
you understand the moving parts much easier, and it becomes more repeatable, and you see things earlier on, so it's not so reactionary, right? You're actually setting a plan up to not let it run itself, but you understand how it's running. So I like to tell them, hey, I've got something I'd like you to talk to someone who felt that way. Right. Don't take it from me, because you might think I'm out here trying to sell something. I'm trying to show you a different way.
Right.
Yes, the beginning is going to be more difficult, but that's what we're here for. We're here to walk you through that. Once you come out the other end, you'll be very appreciative, not only from a standpoint of what's your day-to-day, but also the financial aspect of it.
And the strategy isn't just about I'm going to show you how magically I can make claims disappear. That's not the strategy. It's more just, I'm going to show you, where your claims are coming from, why they're coming, and some things you can do to better manage that. And when you do, you keep the money. It doesn't stay somewhere else. Is that a good description, you would think, of what we're talking about? Because you don't have special clients that don't have claims. I imagine they have some claims.
Only in the first couple of months when we roll it out, and there's a lag.
Yeah.
No, everyone has claims. So, that's where I get back to, you have to pay your way, right? You're going to have claim activity, but the reality is, do you get to do anything with the data? In a fully insured where you're just paying renewals, you don't. And I'm very careful to tell them this isn't a quick fix. This takes time. That's why I don't want you to get into this for a 1 year in and out. This is a 3 to 5 year. And if you see it through, you're going to have that good claims year. And that's where you get to reset the price. That's a true cost curve bending, right? Today, you kind of, it's like an annuity. It just keeps going up, hopefully. But on the healthcare side, that's not what you want.
Yeah.
You want to reset it. And you talked about PEPY. I have customers that have been doing this for 12 plus years, and their PEPY is lower today than it was 12 years ago.
Wow.
And I like to show them, well, let's say you got that 5% over that 12-year run. What would it look like? And I graph it out because I'm a visual person.
Right.
CFOs love it. They take that right to the board meeting. Here's why we're doing it.
Right. Yeah. When you do the math like a PPY of like just a couple $1,000 difference, and then you apply that across the employee count, and you do that over, say, as you said, 5 years, it's real money. I mean, it's really, and I just like it because it really gives you something. I mean, our own company, we look at it. And so, we have a year where we might be at 15,000, but then we can do some things, make some changes, and we bring it back down to 11 or 12. And,
Right.
And that's the kind of thing. And I actually, in my financial reporting I receive, one of the tabs is our health plan and where we are on a PPY basis. And I get that every month. So, so I know, hey, we're having a year that's pretty good in that category. So, any other success? I mean, you mentioned the pharmacy. Any other customers who, working with you, were able to really improve their health plan in a way that you want to share with us?
Yeah, sure. So when you have that good year, what do you do with it, right? Because most employees expect an increase. When you come into that open enrollment meeting, you're not the favored son, right? You're like, oh, here comes the insurance guy. What's he going to say this year? So now we've done all this work. We're seeing these savings. Then I go back to my group and say, this is where it gets fun. Right. Let's talk about how do you give back and what does that look like? So we'll do it through generic utilization. Give them $0. Give $0 for every office visit. And they look at me like, well, is that expensive? I said, well, let's take 75 employees and they each have 2 dependents. You got 150 people. If every single one of them went for $50, it's not going to move the needle on your medical spend.
Right.
Now, everyone's not going to do that, but do you know how that's going to be received? They're going to be like, I can't believe number one, my premium's not going up. Number two, I get to do this now for free to take my kids to see a doctor. And then third is, what about some really deep and broad EAP program? Now, we've partnered with a vendor that, and there's a lot of tools we've used through Bywater and the TPAs that expand upon mental health, disease management, and you start giving this to the employee. They look at their employer in a whole different fashion. And then $1 down the street, I could make more, might not mean as much, especially when you're talking manufacturing.
Right.
So I think that's where the successes are built. And when you start repeating that, you've had that success at Roundstone. Employees really start to value that. Right. And then when you have a bad claim year, if you come in and say, hey, we need 5, 6, 8, 10%, but the last 4 years we've had 0, it's a much easier conversation. Employees feel valued, not just like they're another number.
Yeah, I always have to sometimes remind folks, like, it's not normal that we haven't had a cost share increase in 8 years or something like that. That's the rest of the marketplace is not experiencing that. But yeah, reinvesting the savings, I bet you that makes HR feel pretty good when the employees are the ones that see some of the dollars.
It does. And interestingly enough, we just renewed a 5-1, and that group, they had a rough claim year. They had a couple outlier claims, and it was probably in their 4-year run, their worst year. And we sat down and said, if there's ever a year you would want to pass on an increase, this is it. You're over your expected, you're closing in on your max. They're non-repeatables. So these are one-off. So now you get to decide. If you're the insurance company, fully insured, you're going to try to get all your money back.
Yeah.
Well, you're the company now.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that to your employees? Do you want to get all that money back? And really, what does that mean? This group ended up saying, you know what? We're still going to hold the line.
Right.
We think this is valuable. They've done their job. We've really profited. We've got a nice surplus. We can absorb this. We're still going out with a 0.
That probably takes some education with the employer to understand that idea of non-repeatable. And, an insurance company would try to capture that money back, but you can or you don't have to.
Right.
And that's part of the education I imagine you bring to your clients. That's the whole self-funding knowledge that you are able to help them out with.
Yeah, and that's why you asked that question. It takes time, right? And you've got to learn all these, and sometimes you learn it through going to battle, and you figure out what you don't know. So I've always tried to be, like I said, a student of the game and really try to understand and pick people's brains, work with my RPL, work with these prescription drug companies, and understand, for lack of a better term, like, where are all the bodies buried? How do we uncover everything so we know who we are?
Right.
So at the end of the day, my clients are comfortable that we showed them the absolute best that's available. Right. And some of them, they still want to say, well, can you quote the fully insured world? I'm like, well, let's just look at your max cost. Let's just max everything out. And some of them make me go through that, and that's fine.
Right.
And they're like, well, that's 5% less this year. I'm like, let's not focus on this year. If you have a max claim year in a captive, this is what happens. What happens in a fully insured world? And that's what they always ask me when I'm going out prospectively is, well, what happens if we hit that max? And my first comment back is, before I answer that, how do you think the fully insured carriers would react if you hit that number? If you came in at 125%, what do you think your renewal would be?
Right.
And, I don't give them the number, and they kind of look at me like, okay. Yeah. And that's the education, is it's not an apples to apples comparison when you're first starting.
Right.
It's what happens at the next renewal that can really start moving that needle.
All right. So we were talking before we went on live air here. And so I know you didn't graduate yesterday. I know you got out of college not too different from when I got out of school. So as a fellow who's been very successful, built a great business, had great outcomes in your career as a benefits professional, what would you share with the newer folks about these topics and about these issues? Anything you would share with the new guys?
Yeah, number one, dig in, work hard. My first 8 years, I had more hair than this, and I spent a lot of hours trying to become a pro at what I did, no matter if it was in the insurance world or the world I existed in before. I think sometimes young kids come out. My business partner and I were talking about this. Is some of these other places will throw money at kids, and they don't have to become a student of the game. I would say, and we like to attract the folks that are really interested in doing that. And don't be afraid to be transparent, and don't be afraid to say no. Or I don't know the answer, right? Because sometimes when these topics come up, if you're not forthcoming with them, it's going to come out. So I would tell the young kids who are coming out again, you can make a great living at this, but do it the right way, right? I learned late in life, right? I came to the agency side late. I was in my 40s. So I was working with the carrier side forever. So these kids that we're now talking to, they're 25, 26, 27, I'd say learn this first. Right? Because you're gonna set yourself apart. We talked about it. Why don't more advisors do it? It's not easy.
Right.
But once you learn it is. And if you're in the 90th percentile of people who know what they're doing, how's that going to set you apart when you walk into a prospect and you start talking about some really creative ideas that they may have never heard of or didn't think were possible?
Yeah, I mean, I always joke when I'm talking to a younger group that you don't want to be a commodity. You really want to be a consultant. You want to be in there earning trust and bringing new ideas. Because if you're a commodity, it's a beauty pageant. I mean, that's what it is. Yeah. And, not everyone does well at beauty pageants. That's take it from someone who's probably wouldn't do well in a beauty pageant. Because, like you mentioned, the hair issue is a problem. But, so that's good advice. Anything else you'd like to share with me or the younger advisor generation or just the employer market? What about, really, do you feel good about what you do and you're happy with your choices you've made? It's been a good career. You just mentioned to me earlier, you got a daughter that's going to bring you a grandchild. So life is good for Frank.
Life is good, but let's be real. Life is hard, right? I lean on my faith heavy, Mike. Okay. I get up every morning and give it up. And what does that mean to different people? I don't know. But to me, it means I'm going to do the absolute best I can with what I'm provided that day.
Right.
But I'm going to do my best. I'm not going to go into it halfway.
Right.
I would like to say just, I love what you've created here. It's so unique. And I talk to a lot of captives because when you start writing captives, it's interesting how more reach out to you. Like, oh, you know what you're doing. So I love how you're staying on top of it, how you're not afraid to grow. I've worked with some insurance companies prior to becoming a consultant where they did something really cool and then they just kind of believed their story.
Right.
And they just got stale. And that's easy, I think, to do because you become very successful. You've built a great company, a great new building. But I like that you're constantly pushing that envelope. I like the way you're going about that. And I like what you're doing online, what you're saying, you're staying visible and you're showing results.
Right.
So I would say you're doing something right. So again, back to those folks out there who might not know about this or might say, I don't know about that. Make a phone call.
Right.
It's that simple to call, find out who your RPL is or call corporate and say, hey, I'm interested in learning out about this. You've got a nice training session for up and comers.
Right.
Attend one. Don't be afraid to do that, or else you'll get caught in that web. And 10 years down the road, it'll be a lot harder to make the change than if you just go into it kind of open-minded.
Yeah. You're touching on a lot of our core values, this always be learning, which you share. And I just think it's so critical. And outcomes matter, get it done. That's another one of our values. So I'm glad to hear it because, we really promote our values. And so I like when the marketplace recognizes that, geez, they're acting in this way.
Yeah.
I just the other day I'm the back of my phone, and this relates to your faith. On the back of my phone, I have a sticker from a speaker we had at one of our captive conferences, and we have our annual captive conference coming up in Dallas in a couple weeks. But the Blue Angels, this was a fellow who flew for the Blue Angels, and at the end of every flight, the Blue Angels sit down at a table together and go over what they did right or what they did wrong. But before they start, the first words out of each one of their mouth is, glad to be here. And that's much like when you wake up in the morning and you say, I'm going to do my best for the people I work with, and I'm just glad to be here. And I subscribe to that. It's a great way to go about life, And,
thank you.
Very rewarding. So congrats on that. Glad to hear that, and really appreciate you taking time out of your day on a Friday morning to come sit here and chat with me. I know your time is valuable, so I do appreciate it. Thank you
welcome.
so much.
We're looking forward to seeing you in Dallas.
Oh, cool. You're going to be down there?
I'm going to be down there. Actually, I have a customer going.
Oh, really? That's great.
So, I've really come to enjoy the forum. So that Medical Captive Forum has been a big kind of impetus in me learning.
So you don't hold a grudge against Dallas because you were a Houston guy, right?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I was sharing this with Cassidy when I came up, was back in the day when I was on the insurance side, I trained a kid out of Fort Worth.
Okay.
And I have not seen him since 1998. And I was watching the college football playoffs, and TCU was playing.
Right.
And I saw a commercial, and lo and behold, his wife, Katie, has become the first CEO of the largest train company in the world out of Fort Worth.
Wow.
And it was one of those, right? Those God moments, right? Sent a text to Jeff and said, hey, I'm going to be in Dallas.
Yeah.
So we're going to have coffee that first day.
Oh, that's great.
I have nothing. I love Dallas. Actually, when I played in the World Football League, my first injury, I spent about 6 months in Dallas recuperating from the injury. Got to know Deep Ellum and parts of Dallas. So great city. But animosity between Houston and Dallas, it was always fun.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have a good time. We got all kinds of activities scheduled, and I'm going to do my best to pretend like I know anything about the West and cowboy hats and bolo ties.
You actually look good in a cowboy hat.
I'll be like 6'10" if I did that, I think.
That's why you'd fit in Texas.
Well, thanks again, Frank.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Yep.